Guys, it's great to see you. What a setting. I mean, we should do this, I think, for every film project.
We should do this more often. Yeah, we should.
Nice. Even if it has nothing to do with
Hawaii.
Or water or anything, we should do this every time. Congratulations on just a marvelous, fantastic job on this film.
Thank you.
What was it like to channel these guys and play these characters? What did it feel as you were in these roles?
I mean, I'd say more than anything, it was responsibility. You know, I felt a real sense of serious responsibility and, you know, respect and duty to these men to portray them accurately and, you know, not just these individual men, but, you know, we also represent the bravery of all of the men on the front line in the war, you know, and yeah, it was incredible responsibility.
It's funny you mentioned that. Not funny, but just it's cool that you mentioned that because not just that World War II, which was a pivotal moment of history, but even soldiers that are fighting today. I flew over here to Hawaii with a plane full of soldiers that were getting transferred over here, and I heard them just conversation, new guys that were coming to Hawaii, and they were talking about, you've got to go to the USS Arizona. It's surreal to stand there. So my question to you all is, when you're in costume, and again, I know it's a movie, but you're in costume, and could you feel maybe a little bit of what these guys?
I mean, to a degree, yeah, but again, you're on a studio set, and, you know, 3 feet away is craft services where you can just go get some food, and, you know, I mean, it's make-believe, but you got to put yourself in that mindset. When we were here filming in Hawaii,
yeah,
and when we were filming at Pearl Harbor, that felt in the costume, seeing all the actual Navy guys, because we got a bunch of Navy extras to come in, seeing them and just kind of taking yourself and putting yourself in that situation and being here was surreal. Yeah. I actually went to go see my character's grave. He's buried here in Hawaii, so I went to go pay my respects, and that to me was, you know, I was at peace with that, saying thank you, and I'm going to do this.
Yeah, there was a scene that we shot, which was a funeral scene for one of the characters that are very close to us. You know, I'd been at a funeral for a family member the week before that was still very, you know, still very close to my heart, and to be there with pretty much all of the extras being military personnel. You know, behind the camera, there were all of the military personnel lined up with their trucks and their children. You know, we were standing right where I'd been shown that the first Zeros had flown over, you know, when they were flying, and that was one of the most difficult scenes I've ever had to shoot. It wasn't scripted that the character was blubbering and crying his eyes out, so I really had to kind of hold back, and it was very, it was a difficult scene, you know. At the end of the day, or even the next day, I had to say to Mandy Moore, I apologize if I was, you know, too removed in between each take, because I had to walk off and swallow the tears and hold them back. It was incredibly affecting, and it just wouldn't have been like that if we hadn't have been here on Ford Island, you know. It just wouldn't have been. We went to beautiful Montreal afterwards and shot a lot of stuff in the studios out there, and it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same, but we were so informed by being here, you know, by spending the time here, that we could take that with us. And I really felt so grateful that we were able to come to come here and shoot initially, and then now to be back here full circle. You know, there's not much romance left in this industry, or a lot of things nowadays, that this is the most beautiful romantic thing for us to all be here, and for the first screening to be for servicemen on Ford Island, you know, and so it's a really beautiful thing, and like I said, I've never felt anything like that responsibility or that closeness, personal duty on any movie I've ever done before this, and it's really a beautiful thing.
Great to see you both again. Congratulations, fantastic work.
Thank you.
So I got out of this screening last night, loved this movie. I had a long conversation with my mom about World War II, like our family. She found a picture that I just wanted to show you guys. This is her dad that served. She found that picture.
Awesome.
Like Grandpa Al.
Wow.
Nice.
And
where do you serve?
Yeah, I believe he was
Is that Air Force?
Yeah.
Oh, Army Air Corps.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is?
that's Army Air Corps back
There
then.
was no Air Force then.
There was no Air Force.
You guys know more than I do. But just the conversation that I had about what it was like for these guys, you know, to serve. We'll open with this question. As you guys had your uniforms on and costumes and everything ready for this, and I know it's a movie, But could you feel for a second what these guys went through? Not so much the fear of war, but did you channel a little bit of like, wow, these guys are heroes? That kind of...
It certainly puts you closer to it and makes you think about it, about what happened, about the little events, about the little things that had such a huge effect on ultimately world history. That it gets you there. Then also, I guess it goes all the way back to when we were kids, and kids play out battles and stuff like that. Things that they were like. We used to play the Alamo all the time when we were kids.
How'd that go?
Yeah, well, somehow we always lost. But
he's from Texas. I did the same thing.
But no,
Dennis is right.
It's a huge thing. It makes the gravity of what was going on back then.
However, my last name is Morales, so I always made. Never mind, my team win. Did you learn Japanese for this
Yes.
role?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was something that was an important part of the film, but also an important part of Leighton, meaning that Leighton was a naval attaché stationed in Tokyo and in the 30s, knew Yamamoto and loved Japanese culture and spoke fluent Japanese. So I was so happy when they had that in the film, because it showed just how deeply we were embedded in their culture as they were in ours. I mean, even here, as we sit on island of Oahu, we were talking about this earlier, there were 150,000 Japanese that lived in Honolulu at the time. And you really start to understand how deeply embedded the culture was.
Oh, yeah, preparation for the battle. They had spies over here who were taking photographs of Pearl Harbor, which they, I'm talking about years before, which they then created over there over the Western Pacific and to practice bombing runs.
Right.
You're a history buff. How important, and this is for both of you guys, to get this right, to pay the tributes to these guys and these characters, did that weigh heavy on you?
Oh, I would say it weighs heavy on me. I mean, I certainly, when I played real people, and Gordo Cooper, an astronaut, and Sam Houston, and Doc Holliday, and Jimmy Morris, who's still alive, baseball, that I always try to get their spirit right. I do think about what if someone was doing, was playing me, not that there ever will be, hopefully not. But that if it's like I want to try to get it right, their spirit right.
Yeah.
It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Where did this start for you?
It started because, some kids had comic books. I had the U.S. Navy. I came from, my grandfather went Annapolis class of 27. He actually served with some of the, went to class with some of the people in the movie. So I kind of grew up around it and was aware of it. And then I was having lunch with Roland Emmerich one day, and I said, what's the one that got away? And he said, I always want to tell the story of Midway. And I said, well, in 7th grade I made a diorama of the Battle of Midway, so this feels like it was meant to be.
Do you still have that? I remember I did one of those too.
My parents carefully threw all that stuff away, yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, of course I always waited to the last minute, and then my stick figures in the box and all that thing. I was the last one, yeah, I didn't do good in that. Yours was probably way better than mine.
Well, I didn't care about anything else. All the rest of the stuff was terrible, but the Midway one I spent, years on. Yeah.
This must have been, call it a labor of love if I can, but also the research that you had to put into this. Walk me through that process.
There's a tremendous amount of resources, fortunately, because the battle on the U.S. side was very well documented. So there were lots of books and primary source stuff you could go back to. And that was the challenge, is what is the story here that hasn't been told? And I read this little paragraph about Dick Best, Richard Halsey Best, and I said, this is a guy who should have won the Medal of Honor, and this is an emotional story that can frame the rest of the movie. The real challenge was on the Japanese side, where the scholarship had evolved so much over 40 years, and it hadn't really made its way across the Pacific. So in terms of updating the movie, there's this amazing book called Shattered Sword that came out that told their side of the story in this really compelling way. I said, that's also something we can do.
As you uncover the layers of this story, we've heard of the Battle of Midway. What surprised you the most, though, as you uncovered this story?
The more you follow this story, the more you realize how unbelievable it is. These tiny little coincidences that added up to the outcome. The outcome of that battle could have shifted dramatically with just 20 minutes in any direction. Or, little individual choices. If someone, if McCluskey had not decided to turn north and follow that destroyer, the whole course of history would have been altered. And you realize, the more you dig into it, the more unbelievable it seems.
What was important to include in this film? I mean, it's a big story. You're talking about 2 hours in a motion picture. How did you decide what you were going to include?
How do you make it feel like about people, not explosions? That's the most important thing. How do you tell a story that people can relate to on a human level? And that ultimately is a challenge, because you could do this as a 40-hour mini-story series and never possibly get as deep into it as you'd want to get. How in 2 hours do you actually isolate out something that feels relatable and human?
As it started to come together and you saw the cast, it's an incredible cast. There was a show on HBO years ago called The Pacific, and this kind of reminded me of that. Of course, this is dealing with that once, but it puts you there as a viewer.
Right.
When you saw the cast coming together, it was being made into a motion picture. What were you thinking?
You never believe it's going to happen. You can't let yourself believe it's going to happen because you're so afraid it isn't going to happen. So when we were actually the first day here and shooting, and just this rush of emotion, because this movie never should have made. It's an independently financed. It was not financed by a major studio, and somehow it all came together. And that cast, they just worked so hard. They all put research in. I would show up on a set and they'd be holding a biography of their character. They were all so interested and engaged in the story, and that meant something.
Final question for today, sir. What do you hope people take away from this when they see it?
I think we both remember the heroism and sacrifice of this generation, and we also see the reflection of it in our own experience. To me, the modern American military is kind of quietly bearing this huge burden for all of us, and to remember their sacrifice, and also to remember, what makes us American, and why, it still means something, and why the values we stand up for. That's my hope.
What's up, man? I will just say it's great to see you again.
Okay.
You know why I love your movies? And we're going to get to this towards the end here in a little bit, because you blow things up. And it's every boy's dream to see that. I bet it's pretty cool to do it.
Well, I mean, it's not the
Okay.
main reason, but it's like in this case, everything what you see is pretty much proven happened.
Yeah.
So it's even when you see stuff explode, it explodes exactly how described in history books.
And that's what I wanted to bring up, and that's actually what I wanted to open with, the accuracy of this film. We know of the Battle of Midway, from what you study in school and that kind of stuff, but you really don't know the battle. And you're telling that story right now. How important was it for you to keep it as accurate as possible?
Super important, because it was a very complicated battle. Maybe we left some stuff out which we didn't felt was really important, but the basics, why the Japanese, like kind of while they were changing their bombs from land to sea bombs, and everything was like in a disarray, were like kind of that, like attacked in 5 minutes.
Right.
In 5 minutes, 3 carriers got destroyed. Can you imagine that? And it was important to show this as accurate as possible.
You wanted to do this story for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. What drew you to this story?
I saw a documentary and I immediately realized I'm fascinated by it. You have to understand, one of my favorite movies is A Bridge Too Far. And, and it has a little bit that. It has the planning, the politics, the naval intelligence. It's all like kind of part of what a battle, what makes a battle. And in that way, I was really, really fascinated by it.
Did it make it even more special? I'm looking around. This doesn't even look real. Looks like we're in front of a green screen. I mean, like we're not.
I shot back there, like underwater, 3 miles out.
And see, did that make it extra special as well? We're in Hawaii, and
Yeah, it was very extra special because we shot here on all the historic sites, and you feel like the responsibility more when you come here, because everybody knows what happened. Everybody is like a little bit skeptical because we come from Hollywood. Will this be really accurate? And then when they kind of saw the script and everything, they were super supportive. I mean, we could pretty much use everything what we wanted.
the Department of Defense as well, I heard, helped you as well. Excellent.
You need first like an approval by the DoD, but then you still have to ask the commander here.
Right.
He has to give his final okay.
And he did, and
Yeah.
it turned out fantastic, my friend.
Okay.
Great job. Good to see you again.